Okay, hello class. Today what we are actually going to talk about is organizing. So let's start with the definition of organizing. Okay, so what does it mean? It means when we're talking of systematic arrangement of activities, systematically, okay, like when a work has to be done, what happens? There has to be a process how the work has to be done. That entire work is divided into small tasks, and how do we go about with it? How many people are needed at what, and who should be the right kind of human resources? What should be the raw materials required? What should be the technology? When is it required? So the entire process of arranging things. So that's where the management is actually arranging it, and by dividing and subdividing of the activities, that's called organizing. Now, organizing is necessary when you have two or more people working together to achieve a common objective. It needs to be organized. If one person is there, the person can work by himself or herself, but then there are more number of people, then what happens? It needs to be planned out and organized in a proper way. So for every minute spent organizing, an hour is earned. You spend less time. The different steps in organizing process is first comes up is to determine the activities to be performed. Second, once you determine the activities comes up, the next that comes up is to identify the major functions related to these activities, the activities that we are talking of. Then we group and subdivide the different activities based on the different functions that's there, and then we establish relationships amongst individuals and groups. So responsibility, authority, and accountability comes into play. Okay, the next topic that we have is organization and organization structure. So what do we mean by organization? It implies to a group of people who come together for achieving some common objectives. That's what organization is. Okay. Now there are certain principles of organization. These are the basic guidelines which every organization has to follow. First is the purpose of setting up of the organization. Every organization is set up for a basic purpose. What is it? What is it? That's the main thing. What's your objective? What's your purpose? The second comes up is authority and responsibility. So authority, where we talk of leadership, comes into play. So formal authority, responsibility of the leaders as well as employees. Third comes up is responsibility and supervision. So responsibility of the higher authority, when responsibility of supervision here, where we talk of who is actually your boss and whom are you monitoring, who's below you. The fourth talks of scalar principle, where we talk of a clear line of formal authority. It starts right from the top till the bottom: top management, middle level management, low level management, and the common employees. Next comes up is the span of control. Span of control is the extent of control, controlling your subordinates who's working below you. Specialization of functions, that's where we talk of the skills. A person based on their skills should be put into a different or specific department. Say if you are a specialized, if you're doing finance, your major is finance, you should be working in the finance department. If your specialization is marketing, you should be working in the marketing department or the sales department. Coordination of effort, that's the next one. Coordination has to be there. Coordination amongst department, coordination across department. Next comes up is definition. Like every position, I'm repeating once again, every position in an organization should be clearly defined. It should be there in writing. What does that position imply? What are the rules? What are the do's and don'ts for that position? Okay, so this is a picture. Next we come across is where we talk of formal and informal organization, and this is a picture of a formal organization and a picture of an informal organization. And if you actually see, a formal organization is very much structured. It is a structured organization that you see, whereas an informal is more of a friendly atmosphere. Let's go into more details. Now, when we talk of formal organization, so there are rules which is there as to how to govern the procedures and operations. And these rules should be documented. It should be specific so that there are no misunderstandings happening. It talks about authority, responsibility of different people, and the work relationships. Now, what are the characteristics of a formal organization? We have there has to be well-defined rules and regulations, objectives and policies should be determined, and there has to be a status symbol for that organization. Limitation on the activities of the individual. There has to be some limitation what the person can do, what they cannot do. There has to be coordination amongst employees across department. Clear communication has to come through the scalar chain, right from the top management to the lower level employees. And there has to be clear-cut objectives which needs to be attained by the organization, and work distribution has to be there, or as we say, division of labor. Okay, the next that comes up is the informal organization. Informal organization, where we're talking of a relations to a network of personal relationships. Where how is it formed? That people can associate with each other. You have some common bonding. That's when it happens. So it can be formed like with people across departments, people working in the same departments. It could be between people in the department and someone who is outside the organization. It can be anything. So this table actually talks to you about the differences between formal and informal organizations. That's what we have been just discussing right now. Okay, so we come across with the span of management. What do you mean by span of management? When we talk of span of management, we are at or span of control, we are talking of the extent of control. How many people are you monitoring? Okay, or how many employees who are you is reporting to you? Initially, the initial view was 7 should report, but today we have 30 or more per manager. So depending on the size or number of people who are reporting to you, so we can categorize the span of management into a narrow span or a wide span. This is a picture of a wide span of management where we have only, you see there are 7 different people who are under the manager, more people. Okay, so what are the advantages? So when you have more number of people under you, so less managers are required. The hierarchical level decreases. Less less number of people who are there in the management. The level of hierarchy decreases. Less people are there, so less managers required. So you save more wages. Better communication happens between the manager and employee, so you can direct interaction happening rather than going through a medium, a middle level. This you do not have to. You can directly, your employees can directly get in touch with you. So less level of communication for decision to pass through. So less level of hierarchy means the decision can be faster. So it does not percolate through multiple levels of hierarchy. It's less, much lesser. And here what happens, what you need actually, because it's the level of hierarchy, the number of hierarchy is less, the levels, hierarchical levels is less. So what you actually need is, you need to have highly qualified staff who can actually do the work. You do not need more people below you. Clear policies has to be made here, and supervisors are forced to delegate the job. You have to, if you're the boss, you have to ensure that people working you are really taking up responsibilities. You have to delegate the work. And employees who are working, they can make their own decisions, they can carry out their own tasks without interference by managers because there are a lot of people working under you. They have to take their own responsibility. What are the disadvantages? So, less effective supervision when you have more number of people, less time to devote in directing each and every individual. It's difficult on an individual level. Micromanagement cannot happen. So you need in this such a case highly qualified or highly skilled managers. So risk then there's always a possibility that the managers can lose control over their employees because a huge number of employees and managers in this case tend to get overburdened. When you have to manage say 100 people, that's quite difficult as compared to when you're managing 5-10 people. Next we talk about the narrow span of control. Narrow span of control, if you see this, what's exactly up here is you have only one person who is controlling just three, 1:3, and this person is controlling just two. It's 1:2, and again 1:2. So you have few people under you, but the hierarchical layers that increases, number of levels increases. So what's the advantage when you have less people working under you? It's obviously where you are talking about close supervision. It's easy to supervise. You can control in a better way. Better communication between employer and the employees because few people, you do not have to communicate to 100 people, but 5 or 6. It's much easier. What's the drawback? And what happens when you have less people to actually monitor? You as a supervisor, you tend to get involved in your employees' work. And as I said, there are many levels of management. The degree of hierarchy increases, level of bureaucracy increases. It's high cost, leading to high cost and less independence and decision authority for subordinates. Why? Because you have so many people above you who the work is delegated and they're taking care. So you as a common employee, you do not have much decision making power. And there's a huge difference between the top management and the lower level employees because of this hierarchical levels that you have. Okay. Next topic that we have is organizational structure and organizational design. Okay. Now, what is our organizational structure? It tells us how a work is formally divided, grouped, and coordinated. So here we are talking about how activities, such as when we talk of activities, that is allocation of work, coordination, supervision, how they are being done in order to achieve the organizational aims, right? Structure, we are talking of the framework. What is the framework that helps us in achieving, which tells us how the work will be divided, how the process, how the planning goes on, how it's been delegated, how it's been implemented, how the monitoring goes on in order to achieve a goal. Now, when there is a change in the existing structure, it's called organizational design. Mind you, there's a difference. That's a difference between organizational structure and design. Structure, we are talking of the framework based on which the work is done, based on which planning is done, implementation of work is done, based on which resource allocation has been done. But when there's a change in the existing structure, we say it's called organizational design. Okay. Now, when we talk of organizational structure, there are certain factors which has to be taken into consideration. First comes up is work specialization, where we have human resources being employed based on their skills, and according to it, they are divided into different departments. So, as we said, and when we said work specialization, so division of labor comes into play, which helps to increase the employee productivity. Okay, next comes up when we talk of departmentalization. Now, departmentalization, when we are talking of departmentalization, what do we actually see? Let's actually see this. There are different types of departments based on the So the functions based on the skills. Now, the first type that we have is a functional department. When we talk of functional department, so functional department is where the work is divided based on the nature of the functions performed. When we talk of product departmentalization, it is talking of categorizing the work based on the products, type of products that is manufactured. Geographic departmentalization, it is talking of categorizing or grouping of the jobs based on the territory or geographies in different zones. Process departmentalization is categorizing the jobs based on the product or customer flow. So, what are we talking about here? See, so we're talking of the weaving department, dyeing department, printing department, spinning. So it's the process. Next comes up is customer departmentalization. It is jobs are categorized based on the basis of customers who have common needs or problems. Say departments with foreign customers, domestic customers, wholesale or retail customers. And lastly, what we have is cross-functional teams, which is where it's a team made up of groups of individuals who are experts in various specialties and who work together. Okay, the third point that comes up under organizational structure is the chain of command. Chain of command is where we're talking of line of authority that starts from the top level and goes down to the lower level, right? So it actually talks about us when we go and work, like whom do I report to? That's the basic thing. And whom do I monitor? Who's below me? So we're talking of authority, who's the boss. Our responsibility comes into play, and accountability, when I know whom do I report to. So what do I report my work? So I become accountable for my work. And it also talks about when we say unity of command, there's one boss. One boss is much easier than to have multiple bosses. And it also talks about delegation of work. Each person is assigned to carry out a specific set of duties, responding work, and so we are accountable. If I know what my job is, I'm accountable for my work. I cannot pass on that responsibility and point at someone else that the fault is that person if I make the mistake. Okay, next comes up is span of control. Span of control is basically talking about number of people who are directly below me, who reports to me if I am the supervisor or the manager. So we can have a narrow span of control and wide span of control. Now, as I said, in a when we talk of a narrow span of control, you see there are more levels in the hierarchical system, but less number of people to monitor. 1:4, and each of these four persons are again monitoring four. Whereas when we talk of wider span of control, the level of hierarchy is less and more number of people to monitor. One person monitoring 8, and each of these 8 persons again monitoring 8. Okay. Next comes up is where we talk of centralization and decentralization. Centralization is where we are talking to the extent of decision making, the capacity which has been in the hands of our bosses. Centralized because the top bosses make the decisions. That's so the employees do not have anything to say in this case. On the other hand, when we talk of decentralization, that is where we are talking to the extent where the lower level employees can provide their inputs in making decisions. So work is decentralized. So when a decision is made, it is done based on the inputs provided by the employees. Just the final decision, of course, the top bosses make, but based on an open discussion amongst the employees and some consensus comes up. Okay, next is formalization. Formalization is when we talk about the degree to which the jobs in an organization are standardized. Standardized, formalization is standardized, and also the extent to which employees' behavior is guided by rules and procedures, so which is documented. Everything is formalized, it's documented. What should be the rules and regulations? You have a have an employee guidebook, or it talks of the code of conduct. It talks about what each position demands. Okay, we go to the next part, that is organizational design. Now, organizational design can be divided into two parts. One is traditional and the other is contemporary. Uh, Traditional organizational design comprises of simple functional and divisional structure, whereas contemporary talks about matrix, boundaryless, and virtual structure. Let's go into more details. Now, when we talk of simple structure is when you start your business, and when you're starting your business or when your business is you're operating on a small scale. So what happens in this? Less number of departments, and you as the boss, you have more people to control. So what is span of control? Who is controlling it? You, as the boss, if you're your business, so it's you who's controlling it. It's centralized of authority. Less degree of formalization because you're actively involved with the way your employees are working, so formality is much less. But as the size of organization grows, simple structure is not the right kind of structure, so you have to change, go for a higher structure. It cannot be valid. Next comes up is a functional structure, where what happens is it's an organizational structure which groups similar or related occupational specialties together. Like if you are a finance specialist, you will be put in the finance department. So entire work now is divided based on different functions: accounts, finance, marketing, HR, R&D. So that's how it goes, and accordingly you have people, so the skills comes into play. Put the right people with the right skills in the right department. The third type of traditional structure is divisional structure, where what happens, suppose you have your own business and you are spreading out your business throughout the country. So you have the branches set up in different parts of the country, and each of these branches are working by themselves. That you have a branch manager who looks after the day-to-day affairs. The core decisions of the organization is taken place at the head office. That is taken care, but otherwise day-to-day work is taken care of by the branch managers. Okay, right, this is the example of a divisional structure that we have. Right, the table, this is the table which talks about the strengths and weaknesses of the different types of traditional structure. That's what we had actually discussed right now. Now let's go to the contemporary organizational designs. First type is the matrix. Matrix is, it's a type of organizational structure where you have specialists from different functional departments who are working on one or more projects led by a project manager, and once the project is completed, these specialists return to their functional departments. So this is, if you take this example, what happens? See, there are different departments that is there, right? So marketing, operations, finance, HR. There's a project which is actually happening here, headed by, and each of these departments is headed by the respective managers. Now, there's a project which has a team leader, project leader. For the project A, there's a team leader. So this project requires persons from marketing, operations, finance, as well as HR. So these are the functional experts from different departments who are working together in this project. So where the project is concerned, when they're working together in this project, it's the project leader or the team leader who is responsible, who has the final say. But where promotions are concerned, the respective departmental heads will be dealing with the promotions of these persons. Once the project gets over, they go back to the respective departments. Okay. Next comes up is boundaryless. Now, when we talk of boundaries, when a typical organization has internal boundaries, that is horizontal boundaries, where we have different departments, which and each department has their own work. So we are talking about specialization, right? And we're talking about vertical boundaries. There we are talking about the different levels and the hierarchies in the organization. We also have an external boundary. External boundary is where we are talking about the external stakeholders, which is there. Now, what happens up here is, like when we talk of boundaryless, in that case, what happens is, like There is a mobility. You can move from one department to another. There's no such restriction as boundaries. For example, I have the example of a G Electric. There's another very good example up here where we talk of Reliance. Now, when we talk of Reliance, so what happens up here? Reliance has multiple businesses. If someone is working in the Reliance telecom department and wants to actually see that there's a vacancy coming up in their Reliance, say, let's talk of Reliance Fresh, the fresh outlets. So then they can actually shift. They get information, they can shift. Or it can so happen if Reliance today wants some changes to come up, see what happens? The members, employees can actually talk to their customers to come up with some suggestions to the management to what sort of resources, what sort of regarding the quality of the product that they want. So what happens? That boundary between the internal environment and the external environment is broken. Anyone can say, anyone can do it. So the boundary is broken. So we say it's boundaryless, right? So what happens if in that case is where a customer can make a decision about inventory? That was once first made within the organization. Customer is actually talking. When you start taking feedback, ask them. Okay. Next comes up is where we talk of virtual organization. Virtual organization is an organization which has some traditional as features where people are some of the core full-time employees are working in the organization. Sitting there in the office comes, and parallelly there is also something where you have some specialized people who are working but who do not work in the office. They are in different parts of the country but giving their expertise, their knowledge. So that's how it works. Now the good thing is that you do not have to ask actually those high expertise or to come experts or those experts to actually come down and work, because that saves the time of travel, because they can sit back at their own country and give the advice. But certain times you really need people up there in some times of emergency. You may not be able to get in touch with them always at all points of time because of the timeline that we have, the time differences that we have. Okay, so these are the advantages and disadvantages that we just spoke of. Okay, next comes up is where we talk of business process engineering. Right, the business process engineering, the first time it came up, it was in the year 1990. The first time the concept was formed by Michael Hammer. Now, what is it? It's a fundamental rethinking and a radical redesign of the process, drastic change in the existing process to achieve some drastic improvement in your performance. What performance? Like the cost improvement, quality of the product, service, speed. Okay, now radical design is, when we talk of radical design, is where the organization is actually throwing away their or just discarding their existing methods and coming up with something which is much better. So this is basically how an example of business process engineering, where we have a coordination amongst the technology and processes in the organization. Okay, so why do we insist on re-engineering? Why do organizations want it? One is from the point of view of customers who are demanding, if we do not change, they will go switch off to our competitors. And they are demanding, customers are sophisticated, they want the best things, the latest techniques. Their changes, the needs are changing, then they have preferences. The second reason comes from the point of view of competition. Competition in the local market, global market, and because of improvement in the technology. Right? This is an example of, once again, Ford's accountable payable process using the business process reengineering. Same thing. Okay. Now, principles of business process reengineering. First, there are 7 different principles. First is to organize around outcomes, not tasks. Okay, so what happens? The job that should be created should involve all the steps in a process. that would result in a well-defined outcome. Second, talks of having those who use the output of the process perform the process. What does that mean? That work should be carried out by all those people, carried out by people or carried out by people in a position, in a place where it makes most sense to do it. Okay, or in other words, all those employees who are close to the process should be the ones actually doing the work. So what happens? So you save time of shifting things from one place to another. They should be that saves time. Third comes up is where we talk of integrate information processing work into real work that process the information. So in other words, it means that people who are responsible for collecting all the information should also be responsible for processing it. Why? To ensure that the data that you have is correctly processed. Data does not get lost. Treat geographically dispersed resources as though they were centralized. So, have centralized databases, telecommunication networks, which would help companies to link to all their units or their field personnel. That's important. Link parallel activities in the workflow instead of just integrating results. So, why is this should be done? To ensure that there is a coordination during the process. Otherwise, what will happen? There is high cost and delay in the outcome of the overall processes. Okay, put the decision, put the decision point where the work is performed and build control into the process. That is, decision making should be made part of the work performed. How is this possible? This is possible when your employees are educated, they are knowledgeable, plus there is a decision aiding technology. The last thing that comes up, last principle is capture information once and at the source. The information that is collected, right? So what happens? It should be collected and captured only once, just once, at the source where it is created, which would help in avoiding all sorts of erroneous data entries and also costly re-entries. Okay, there's a diagram of the principles of re-engineering. There's steps in business process re-engineering. Okay, there are 6 key steps. The first one is to create a vision. Okay, so what happens? First step is there has to be a clear vision, a clear picture of the reason for the change. Why are we going for this change? And once it's decided, then comes up to select the right kind of people, right team with the right skills. Third comes up is where you need to select and understand the current process so that you can find out what are the loopholes which is there and come up with something better, coming up with a better process. So you need to understand the existing process, what is going wrong in that, what are the areas where you can improve, so that you can, the fourth step comes up from the third, where you develop a new process which is much better, which can handle the challenges which is faced by the old process. Once you develop it, then comes up implementation of the process. You need to implement it as per your plans and followed by evaluation. How far are you successful in implementing this new process? So the benefits of the business process re-engineering. First is it helps in shortening the lead times. Time reduces, okay? Why? Because now what is happening? Today, instead of all the manual work, today it's an automated system. There's information technology. People are investing more in information technology, so resulting in reduction in the wage, less number of people, employees actually needed. Increase in the productivity. So when this happens, when you have information technology coming in. So what happens? Outdated processes are being rejected, resulting in time-saving results and increase in the productivity, which results in better quality of work and which is more customer focused. Why? Today We are changing our techniques from task orientation to process orientation. Focus is more on customers. Okay, next comes up is improving the competitive position. With better technology, we can keep up with the competition, and there is always a scope to come up with new technology. Okay, so this is what we have today under organization. So see you in the next class.